Greetings! It is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on various anime series, where I review them, give you a little bit of information about them, then I tell you some suggestions on how you can use them in your various BESM games. Granted, I'm specifically talking about BESM, but if you want to adapt them for any role-playing game system, it gives you an idea of where you need to start. So let's continue where we left off. I have a couple more from, of course, last season, winter 2016, and a couple more from 2015. So let's start with the two from 2016. I'm going to talk about Nazotokine and Kiitarou Shounen no Youkai Enikki. So let's talk about Nazotokine. So we focus on Tokine. She's a secretary at this company called 10-2, and she just has a normal sort of life. She ends up entering into this strange conference room and finds it kind of this bright white light kind of overtaking her. She finds herself trapped in there, and she has to solve some kind of puzzle to an escape. Upon escaping from there, we learn that she now has this new connection with a strange being called Hachin from this alternate dimension, from this dimension called Quizin. Now, Hachin gathers this kind of intellectual pleasure from people solving puzzles and mysteries. And of course, now he's chosen Tokine to be his surrogate in the Earth-based realm, in our dimension, in order to do this. So we talk about the genres. I call it a game genre. It does have this kind of game of cat and mouse kind of going on, this solving of puzzles, this kind of manipulation going on. In the same retrospective genre as puzzle. It's a puzzle genre because there is huge amounts of puzzles to be solved in there. It's also a little bit about sci-fi. It has alternate dimensions, strange creatures that gives it a sci-fi feel. Now I rate this one a 3. It's an interesting kind of series, but I didn't jump aboard as much as I did some other ones from this season. But it was pretty decent, and it wasn't bad to watch. I would recommend at least checking it out. Now if you're using this in a BESM game, I would say use 175 points. You're going to make your people a team of characters that are going to be solving puzzles and mysteries and everything and the like, effectively under the manipulation of a being from Quizin. It could be Hachin, it could be something else you make up entirely different, but they're going to get into these situations where they have to basically solve puzzles in order to escape from places, from moving on, that they're forced into these mystery/puzzle type situations. Oftentimes, surprisingly and unexpectedly, it's this control that the creature that's manipulating you has over you that's going to be interesting to move on when you're not knowing it. Balancing out maybe like a normal life for a lot of these people, maybe role-playing a little bit of that, and then moving into the puzzle sections, which will be interesting because you'll be trying to mix and match with character skills and abilities with actual players' manipulation of the knowledges, and finding the balance between what kind of skills my character can use in order to gain an advantage to what I know to solve the puzzle is where a lot of fun of kind of solving puzzles and riddles in a role-playing game come from. So next up is Kiitarou Shounen no Youkai Enikki. So we focus on this younger person called Kiitarou, who has actually, in his kind of visual diary of the various spirits he meets along the way. His story takes place that he has this strong spiritual sense, and he was forbidden from entering this one storehouse on his family's property. He ends up doing it, and he gets kicked out of his home. So he ends up kind of wandering a bit until he finds a new place to live. And there he meets a Zashiki Warashi named Suzu, and effectively kind of befriends her, and along the way then more spirits and different things kind of show up, and he has different adventures meeting various characters from Japanese folklore, various spirits and yokai from there. So when we talk about the genres, it's a comedy. It's kind of funny situations. It's the kind of interaction between the yokai and Kiitarou is kind of silly. In that way, it's also supernatural. You've got yokai, spiritual senses, things like that. I'd also call it a folklore. It takes very much more traditional look at how Japanese kind of yokai and spirits are. And so it does have this very folklore feeling to it rather than just the supernatural feeling. I rate this one a 4. It's funny for, he's got little kind of comedy bits in there. It's kind of entertaining. It's interesting in that way. And it drew me in a little more. Now, if you're using this in a BESM game, I'd recommend 150 points. So you're going to have a group of either friends or family, all with probably some kind of powerful spiritual sense that drew them together. If it's family, that makes sense. Maybe they could be, not close relatives. If it's friends, maybe their spiritual senses draw them together. And they're going to have various encounters in their sort of daily lives with yokai, spirits. And granted, when we talk about this, we could have it from be Japanese folklore, or you could actually take folklore from another country. Anywhere in the world that you're more familiar with the folklore from it, you can use that for this, that your group of characters will be encountering these. And you should make it friendly sort of things. There's going to be more comedic overtones to everything, kind of silly meetings, silly situations are going to occur. There's not going to be like this major monsters threat kind of thing. It's going to be more haha kind of silly kind of interesting adventures and dealing with encountering these various creatures of folklore and seeing what kind of results of this. So let's move on from there to the 2 from 2015. I've got Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon and Kyoukai no Rin. So let's start with Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? So this takes place in a fictional country of Orino, which has this place called the Dungeon, where various adventurers dive into it to fight monsters and claim kind of loot and magical items to bring back, and have this kind of entire economy based upon this set within that country. Now within these, there are groups of adventurers that effectively form what would be similar to a guild in most other situations called familia, and each one has effectively a resident deity that looks after it. We focus on 14-year-old Belle Cranol and the goddess Hestia. Belle is the only member of her familia, so he's the only member of her group. And we focus on Belle's adventures, where he travels into the dungeon getting more powerful. Effectively, in this system, they can level up, and you have different levels and different ways that there are groupings within the warriors, and he's trying to get more powerful. But he also meets lots of girls in the dungeon, and his relationships with both his goddess and the various girls he meets make up for what the main elements of the storyline is. You've got your adventuring in the dungeon, and then your relationship with these girls, of which many find attraction to him, and he has one he likes amongst them, and things like that occur. Now I call this one a fantasy. It's very classic fantasy, very classic, almost kind of video game-esque in a way. You've got your groups of characters, they adventure in dungeons. It's been done before, but this is an interesting take on it. It's also an action. He gets into fights with monsters within the dungeon. He's always finding new different types of monsters to battle, getting into conflicts. It's also a romantic comedy. He has his girl that he likes. Other girls like him. The relationships, that deal with it and these kind of attractions make for interesting times and comedic situations occurring. Now I rate this one a 3 just because I found though it was an interesting mix of genres, it didn't make me want to watch it anymore. I didn't dive into it as much as I probably could have, and so that's the only reason I don't rate it as much. You might find it better than I did, just because I didn't give it as much of a chance early on as I probably should have, hence the lower rating. Now, if you're using this in a BESM game, I'd say give your characters 300 points to start out with. They're going to effectively be lower level to begin with, and will gain more power as time goes. Effectively getting character points are going to be effectively the same as leveling up. They're going to be all members of the same familia, and they will have a NPC resident deity with them, whether god or goddess, depending up to you. It seems like goddesses are more common in this situation, but your characters might be the only members of the familia. They're going to be a really small one. You might want an NPC or two, depending on your number of players and the situations of the group, but it's going to revolve around them, as this small group, adventuring into the dungeon and fighting monsters, gaining loot, gaining magic items, and perhaps developing the relationships between each other and other characters they might meet along the way, that their adventure of the day of diving into the dungeon, of going to this level, this location, they meet someone there, they have some kind of, connection. And it's going to be deepening not only their exploration of the dungeon, but their connection to the relationship with the various people they meet, which will be the crux of the game. So it's going to be both adventure-y and fantasy and relationship-oriented. And you want to kind of mash these two together well to make a perfect game. So then let's move on to Kyoukai no Rin. This focuses on Sakura. She's a high school student with a powerful spiritual sense that allows her to see ghosts. She gained it as a young age when she was spirited away as a child for a period of time. She doesn't remember what happens, but she knows that after that point in time, she could see ghosts. She wants to get rid of that ability now. It's not something she really likes. So she runs into this sort of shikigami named Rinne, and who turns out also to be a classmate of hers. And so Lee learns that Rin actually has been sort of tasked with this job of escorting spirits that have regrets, that have sort of stuck on Earth, to the afterlife, in order to be resurrected on the wheel of reincarnation. Basically, send their spirits back into the reincarnation wheel of the world. And the adventures that between the two of them as they kind of develop a relationship with each other and others is what makes up the crux of the anime. And the manga series, which is still ongoing, if you want to check that one out too. So this is, of course, a supernatural. You've got Shikigami, you've got half Shikigami, you've got people with spiritual senses, ghosts, that sort of thing, the afterlife. I'd also call it a romantic comedy. There's a lot of comedic elements, silly things happen, and this sort of romance that develops between Sakura and Rin over the course of, well, the anime doesn't do it quite as much as the manga does, but there's this romance that does develop. You know, it's very slow going, but it is sort of there, and there are other romantic kind of comedic overtones that do exist there. I also call it a school, because it focuses around the two of them and their school life more than anything. That, you know, strange things happen at school that they have to deal with, other beings that might be sort of the villains of the series or the antagonists usually revolve around whatever they're doing at their school. So yes, it definitely is more school than anything. I rate this one a 4. It's done by the same person who did Inuyasha, Ranma 1/2, Urusei Yatsura, which I've only talked about Ranma 1/2 so far, I believe. So, yes, these are all great series, and this is another one by the same artist, manga artist. And, you know, the anime adaptation, they do very well of her work adapting into anime. So if you're using this for a BESM game, I recommend 250 points. You should probably make your group of people basically supernaturally oriented, whether some of them are half Shikigami, just have high spiritual sense, maybe are something else, some other kind of combination of beings. They're effectively mostly human, but they have a supernatural side to them. And this group is, for whatever reason, which is going to be developed by your group of characters, they're helping people out on the wheel of reincarnation. It's for the same reason that Rin has his own personal reasons and others kind of help him out then. It might be that one of the characters has a really good reason and others might help them out. But regardless, then you're going to also deal with other beings that are supernatural. Shikigami, possibly exorcists, maybe even some creatures like demons or other supernatural threats which might show up at their school that they're going to have to deal with on the other side of it, that they're going to have not only this sort of job they kind of do and the relationship that develops while doing that, but other strange maybe antagonists or just other rivals and more interesting characters might show up within their purview of their school life and also affect them in the way that they are doing things in their sort of job. So that's it for today. I introduced you to 4 more anime, which I think are great ones that you can use as worlds for their example for your BESM games. I gave you some great suggestions about it, and of course I did review them, so if you want to check them out or read any manga that's based off of them, go ahead and do that. They're great. They're all great series, really, to check out regardless. But anyway, if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows you support the channel, the Empire, and the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.